in the middle of a lovely little town, surrounded by hills and streams. I grew up in a world far from the busy city life. Our small, old house, with its squeaky floors and windows that looked out over wide fields, felt like its own little world. This is where my story began. My parents weren't rich, but they were full of kindness and wisdom. My dad was a carpenter, and his hands were rough from years of work, but he was gentle and taught me the importance of hard work and being humble. My mom was a school teacher, and our home was always filled with books and stories that sparked my imagination. Life in our town was peaceful and simple. People were friendly, and the best times were when the whole community came together for events. I loved this life, enjoying small things like the smell of the earth after rain, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot, and the birds singing at dawn. I first met David at the local library. He was different from anyone I had known, someone from the city, with a bit of sophistication but also very down to earth. His family was well known for their wealth and business influence, but David, with his easy smile and interest in my simple stories, felt like a breath of fresh air. At first, our talks were careful, like we were from two different worlds. He told me about city life, fast and full of opportunities, while I shared stories of my town, the harvest festival, walks by the stream, and our close-knit community. We often met at an old bench by the lake, talking for hours. The peaceful lake, with its calm waters reflecting the sky, became a symbol of our growing bond. One evening, David said to me, "Nancy, I've always been surrounded by people who care more about money and status, but with you, I found a calm that I never knew existed. You've shown me a different way of living, one that's real and full of warmth." His words made me feel something deep inside. I replied, "David, where we come from doesn't matter. It's who we are when we're together that counts. You've opened my eyes to dreams I never thought possible." As we grew closer, David shared more about his family, especially his mother, who had high expectations. He respected her, but you could tell he was worried about how she would react to our relationship. "She has her own ideas about who I should be with. I just don't know how she'll take, well, us," David said, his hand trembling slightly as I took it in mine. "We'll face it together," I reassured him. "Love isn't about where we come from or what others expect. It's about two people choosing each other." The day David proposed was simple. No big gestures, just a promise to be together forever. Looking into his eyes, full of hope and love, I knew this was just the start. When I was about to meet David's family, I was nervous. Their big house felt so different from my home. David held my hand and gave me a reassuring smile. "Just be yourself, Nancy, that's all you need to do," he said quietly. "I hope your mom doesn't think I'm out of place," I said, a little worried. "Mom can be tough, but remember, I'm with you," David said. When we walked into their fancy dining room, David's mom, Warla, greeted us. She was tall and had an air of authority. She looked at me quickly, and I could tell she wasn't too pleased. "So, this is the girl who has my son's heart. Interesting choice, David," she said, her voice sharp. Dinner was fancy, with dishes I didn't even recognize. Warla offered me a plate with a slice of something. "I guess these dishes might be too fancy for you, Nancy. We can get something simpler if you'd rather," she said, sounding a bit condescending. I felt embarrassed but politely said, "No thanks, I'm always happy to try new things." As the evening went on, her comments became more pointed. She looked at my simple dress and said, "Is that what you wear for dinner in your town? It must be hard to find good clothes on a small budget." David tried to change the subject, but his mom wasn't letting up. "So, Nancy, what do your parents do? It's always interesting to learn about different lives," she asked, her voice judgmental. "My dad is a carpenter, and my mom is a school teacher," I said, feeling her gaze on me. "Oh, how quaint," she replied, dripping with sarcasm. "Hard-working, I'm sure, but I guess they couldn't give you much of a financial head start." The evening continued with her poking at my small-town life, my parents' jobs, and even my salary. Every comment, though polite on the surface, was meant to hurt. David was uncomfortable, but his mom seemed to enjoy it more. When we left, David's dad, Jackson, pulled me aside with a kind smile. "Nancy, you did well, don't let her bother you, she'll come around," he said. In the car, David apologized over and over. "I'm so sorry, Nancy, I didn't think she'd be this harsh." I sighed, feeling hurt but determined. "It's okay, David, I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I love you, and that's all that matters." That night, as I lay in bed, his mother's words still stung, but I felt stronger. This wasn't just about fitting in, it was a test of our love and my strength. and I was ready for it. As our wedding day got closer, things grew tense. Orla, who was in charge of the wedding plans, seemed to enjoy putting down my ideas and choices. One afternoon, while discussing the wedding dress with David and his mom, it became clear that David's mom had other ideas. "That dress, Nancy, it's so plain. Don't you want to stand out on your big day? After all, you're marrying into the family," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. David squeezed my hand under the table, giving me a supportive look. "Mom, Nancy looks beautiful in that dress. It's her choice, and it's perfect." But his mother wasn't letting up. "Oh, David, let's be realistic. This is a big event. People expect a certain standard. Nancy, darling, you should think about wearing something more suited to our family status." I tried to stay calm, though her words stung. "I appreciate your concern, but I really love my dress. It means a lot to me." She waved her hand dismissively. "Well, it's your day, I guess, but remember, it's not just about you. It's also about how you represent us." As the days passed, her comments became more frequent and cutting. She criticized everything from the flowers to the food, even the invitations. Each remark felt like a dig at my background, as though I wasn't good enough. David and I talked about it a lot, often late into the night. "I can't believe she's being so difficult," David would say, clearly frustrated. "I just wish she could see how amazing you are, how much you make me happy." I would lie there, feeling his arms around me, a mix of love and sadness in my heart. I knew it wouldn't be easy marrying into your family, but I didn't expect it to be this hard. The wedding day arrived, bright and clear, but I couldn't shake the unease inside me. My parents and I had worked hard to make everything perfect, despite Marin's constant criticisms. As I put on my simple but beautiful gown, I hoped the day would go smoothly. The ceremony was lovely, filled with love and vows. David's eyes were full of affection and promise as we exchanged our vows. But even though everything was going well, I was anxious about the reception, especially the speeches. As expected, Orla took the microphone, and everyone fell silent. Her commanding presence made everyone pay attention as she began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice clear, "today we celebrate the union of my son, David, with Nancy, let's say, someone from a different world." Whispers spread through the crowd. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. She went on, her words cutting. "While some might praise David for his charitable act in helping someone from the streets, we must remember our family's reputation. It's important to keep our status high, not let it be dragged down by those trying to use our name to climb higher." The room fell silent. My parents looked at me, shocked and hurt. David's face was full of disbelief and anger. The guests, a mix of our friends and David's wealthy acquaintances, didn't know how to react. My heart sank. Her words were more than just insults. They were an attempt to humiliate me in front of everyone. As she ended with a forced toast to our future, the applause was weak and unsure. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence. David stood up, his voice shaking. "I'm sorry, Nancy. This isn't what I wanted." His eyes were full of love and regret. I looked around at the guests, feeling humiliated. The weight of her words hung in the air, casting a shadow over what should have been the happiest day of our lives. After the speech, the mood was still tense. Then, David's grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor, who was respected and held authority in the family, asked for the microphone. Everyone turned to her, sensing that she was about to say something important. "Good evening," she began, her voice strong and clear. "I need to speak about something, Nancy," she said, her voice carrying authority. "You've been unfairly criticized today, criticism no one should face, especially not on their wedding day." "Mom, you've crossed a line," David said, his voice firm but measured. "It's one thing to criticize Nancy and her background, but this is about respect, and you've lost it." Warla's face twisted with frustration as she shot him a glare. "You don't understand, David. I've been trying to protect you, to ensure that our family keeps it standing. You don't realize what's at stake here." David shook his head, his jaw clenched. "What's at stake is our family's integrity. You've embarrassed us all. I can't stand by and watch you tear Nancy down like this anymore." The room was still, heavy with the weight of the moment. Mrs. Eleanor's piercing gaze moved from Warla to David, then back to her daughter-in-law. "This isn't about protecting anyone, Warla. It's about power and control, and it's about time we stopped allowing it to destroy our family." David's father, Jackson, spoke up again, his voice low but unwavering. "I've spent too many years avoiding confrontation, but this is the last straw. Warla, you need to learn to respect others, and that includes Nancy. You're not exempt from accountability." Worla stood up, her movements sharp with indignation. "I don't need this. I've given everything to this family, and this is how I'm repaid." Her voice wavered slightly, betraying the fury and confusion swirling within her. "Mrs. Eleanor didn't falter. You've given to this family, yes, but it was never about the money. It was about the values we uphold, and you've lost sight of that. Worla, you'll find your own way now, without relying on us." There was a long silence, thick with tension. Worla's eyes darted between her husband and her son, her face contorting as she processed the reality of her situation. Finally, she sank back into her chair, defeated, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been trying to do what's best for all of you, but I guess I've failed." David sighed, walking over to me and taking my hand. "We don't need your approval, Mom. We just need you to stop trying to control everything." His words hung in the air, an unspoken finality settling over the room. Mrs. Eleanor nodded, her gaze softening. "This isn't a punishment, Worla. This is an opportunity for growth. It's time you start living with the consequences of your actions." Worla sat there, a mixture of anger and hurt etched across her face, but beneath it all, a realization was beginning to settle in. She had been exposed, her attempts to control the family now laid bare. David's voice, though firm, softened as he added, "We'll move forward, together, but you need to do your part, too." As the meeting came to a close, the heavy silence that had hung over the room began to dissipate, replaced with a sense of cautious optimism. David's family had been shaken, but for the first time, it felt like the scales were starting to balance. As we left the house, hand in hand, I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. The confrontation had been necessary, but now, there was a new chapter to begin. With Mrs. Eleanor's steadfast support, and David by my side, I knew we had the strength to face whatever came next, together. "Mom, Grandma's decision is tough, but it's fair. You need to understand how your actions have affected everyone," David said. I sat there, watching it all unfold. I felt both sympathy and relief. David held my hand under the table, giving me quiet support. The meeting ended with David's mom shocked, slowly realizing the situation. She had always relied on her family for everything, and the idea of having to work was overwhelming for her. I couldn't help but chuckle quietly as we left. David leaned in close. "I never thought I'd see the day when Mom couldn't say anything, but maybe this is what she needs to change." I nodded, feeling hopeful. Maybe this will be a fresh start for her, for all of us. The family meeting had been hard, but it felt necessary. It seemed like a turning point that could change things for the better in David's family. The honeymoon was a nice break for David and me. As we walked along the beach, the sound of the waves helped take away the stress of everything that had happened. One evening, as we watched the sunset, David wrapped his arm around me. "I'm sorry our wedding turned into such a mess, Nancy. I wish things were different," he said softly. I leaned into him, feeling his warmth. "It's okay, David. It wasn't your fault. The important thing is we're together now, away from all that stress." David sighed and looked at the ocean. "Yeah, but when we go back, we'll have to face what's going on with my mom. It's going to be tough for her." I nodded, understanding. Maybe this will be a chance for her to see things differently, to grow. We spent the rest of the days exploring and talking about our future. The struggles we faced seemed to bring us closer together, reminding us how much we loved each other. On our last night, as we packed, David said thoughtfully, "You know, Nancy, everything that happened made me realize how important you are to me. I can't imagine going through life with anyone else." I smiled, touched by his words. "I feel the same, David. We've been through a lot, but it's only made us stronger. We can handle anything as long as we're together." As we headed home, I felt at peace. Our honeymoon hadn't just been a break from everything, it had been a time to grow closer and prepare for the next chapter of our lives. We were going home to a changed situation, but we were facing it together, stronger than before. Coming back from the honeymoon, David and I didn't know what we'd find at his family's house. The car ride was quiet as we thought about the changes we were coming back to. When we arrived, the first thing we noticed was David's mom was missing. Inside, Mrs. Eleanor, his grandmother, greeted us with a knowing smile. "Welcome back. I'm sure you're wondering about the changes here," she said lightly, but with a serious tone. "Yeah, where's Mom?" David asked, looking around. Mrs. Eleanor took a deep breath, still smiling. "Well, after you left, Worla caused a scene. She demanded I give her money again. When I refused, she left. She's living in a small apartment now and looking for a job." David and I exchanged looks. It was a huge change from the life she was used to. And there's more, Mrs. Eleanor added, leaning in as if sharing a secret. Your dad is thinking about divorcing her. She finally pushed him too far. David shook his head in shock, mixed with relief. I can't believe it. I knew things would change, but this is more than I expected. I touched his arm. It's a lot to take in, but maybe this is a good thing, a chance for everyone to start fresh. That night, dinner felt calmer. David's mom wasn't there, but the atmosphere was surprisingly more peaceful. It felt like a real family gathering for the first time in a long while. On the drive home, David seemed deep in thought. I always hoped things would change, but I didn't expect it to happen like this. Mom's going to have a hard time with this, he said. I nodded. It's tough for her, but maybe this is something she needs to go through. And your dad too, to find some peace. The ride home was quiet as we both thought about the changes. The family we left before the honeymoon wasn't the same one we were coming back to. It was a lot to process, but in many ways, it felt hopeful. Change could be hard, but it was often the path to something better, and we were ready to face it together.